We continue with our discussion of The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Wengrow. This is the fifth part of our interpretation. One of the book's most compelling aspects is its use of archaeological evidence to speculate about history, essentially, rewriting it. The history we are familiar with is typically the history of civilizations recorded in writing, but that perspective is extremely limited. Written language has only existed for a few thousand years, while humanity entered the Neolithic era over 10,000 years ago. What happened between a few thousand and 10,000 years ago? That remains largely unknown to us. For example, in our last discussion, we mentioned that the Japanese archipelago has a history spanning over 10,000 years. Some readers were skeptical, questioning how such a small place could have such a long history. The answer lies in archaeological discoveries. Scholars have uncovered architectural remains in Japan, dating back over 10,000 years. Moreover, they found evidence that these structures were repeatedly demolished and rebuilt over millennia, along with fluctuations in the level of craftsmanship. This suggests that people alternated between settled and dispersed living arrangements over time. There are no written records, no myths or folklore recounting these events, yet archaeological evidence clearly indicates that something happened there. Historians of the past played with words, but modern history is an evidence-based science. And what archaeology reveals is often far more fascinating than recorded legends. The reality is that, what we know from written records is not only an incomplete account of historical events, but also an incomplete account of major events. In fact, it may not even reflect the mainstream of history. Take China, for example. Over the past few decades, archaeologists have painted a picture of Chinese history that was previously unimaginable. Everyone can recite the familiar timeline. Yao, Shun, Yu, Xia, Shang, Zhou. Spring and autumn, warring states, turmoil ensues. But did you know that until 1899, during the 25th year of the Guangxu Emperor's reign in the Qing dynasty, scholars only confirmed the existence of the Shang dynasty when oracle bones were discovered in Henan? Before that, it was thought to be merely a legend. It was through archaeology that the locations of the two Shang capitals were determined. The repeated appearance of oracle bones containing records of Shang kings solidified our understanding of the dynasty. Even in the 20th century, and as late as the 2000s, many scholars still doubted the existence of the Xia dynasty, considering it a myth. Why? Because Shang oracle inscriptions never mentioned Xia. This is puzzling. Shang was supposedly founded after overthrowing Xia, so why is there no mention of it? We don't know. It was only through continuous excavations at the Erlitou site in western Henan that scholars increasingly became convinced that Xia was real, and that it was located at Erlitou. Erlitou, dating back to around 1900 BCE, was a massive city with palaces, aristocracy, and bronze technology, far more advanced than the prehistoric Japanese settlements mentioned earlier. However, despite years of excavation, no written records have been found. Yet, the evolution of the Erlitou site over centuries perfectly connects with the emergence of the Shang dynasty. Having a city means having the foundation for civilization. Japanese settlements, in comparison, were merely prehistoric villages. It was the discovery of Erlitou that pushed back China's recorded civilization to 1900 BCE, confirming an unbroken 4,000-year history. And this isn't the end. In present-day Shandong province, two settlement sites exceeding 300 hectares, Liangqingzhen and Yaowanqing, have been dated to around 2600 BCE. This discovery pushed China's civilization back another 700 years, allowing us to confidently round up and say China has a 5,000-year-old civilization. But what historical period do Liangqingzhen and Yaowanqing correspond to? Were they related to Yao, Shun, and Yu? What stories unfolded there? We have no idea. However, we do know how they influenced later civilizations, such as Erlitou and the Shang dynasty. Archaeological discoveries also present new puzzles. In Shenmu, Shaanxi province, the Shimao site, a city spanning over 400 hectares, dates back to around 2000 BCE, even earlier than Erlitou. The inhabitants of Shimao mastered complex craftsmanship, produced bronze, and used jade artifacts. They built enormous palaces and pyramidal structures, suggesting the presence of a kingdom. However, Chinese historical records make no mention of Shimao. Crucially, Shimao is located in the north, near regions associated with Mongolian nomadic peoples. At a time when the Central Plains had yet to form even the Xia dynasty, why did such a large city exist there? What was its relationship with the Central Plains? We don't know. South of Shimao, in Xiangfan County, Shaanxi Province, lies the Taosi site, dating to the same period. Some scholars speculate that Taosi was the capital of Yao. Note: Yao Wangqing is not Yao's actual capital. It is simply a site that has historically been called by that name. Taosi, founded around 2300 BCE, started as a village, grew into a 60-hectare town, and later expanded into a 280-hectare city. It had an astronomical observatory and early forms of written symbols, making it a highly advanced civilization of its time. Archaeologists can analyze the layers of the site to infer what happened at different points in its history. A significant event at Taosi became a key piece in the logical chain of the dawn of everything. Taosi originally had a ruling class, a palace complex covering 2,000 square meters, and an aristocratic cemetery. However, around 2000 BCE, a dramatic transformation occurred. The city walls were destroyed. Functional zoning disappeared. The residential areas expanded across the entire city, even turning the former palace into a garbage dump and the aristocratic district into a stone tool workshop. Aristocratic tombs were desecrated. Chinese scholars believe this was a deliberate political act. Perhaps a peasant uprising that wiped out the aristocracy, leading to a period of collapse and chaos. However, Graeber and Wengrow challenge this interpretation. Taosi did not fall into ruin. Instead, it continued expanding. From 280 hectares during the rebellion to 300 hectares by 1800 BCE, remaining vibrant for centuries. If it had collapsed into anarchy, how did it sustain 200 years of prosperity? Graeber and Wengrow propose that Taosi experienced the world's first documented social revolution. Perhaps the common people united to overthrow monarchy and establish a republic. This aligns with the political ideals attributed to Yao, Shun, and Yu, yet Chinese records contain no such account. Reality, it seems, is more fascinating than legend. The revolution that took place in Taosi also occurred in Teotihuacán, a major city in Mexico, around the year 300 AD. In that case, there is even more evidence showing that a true republic was established, which significantly improved the lives of common people. The central theme of this discussion is whether cities inherently necessitate social hierarchy and bureaucratic rule. Traditional theories claim that hunter-gatherers lived in small kin-based groups. The well-known Dunbar's number suggests that our brains can only maintain meaningful relationships with about 150 people. Thus, even in cities, most of the people we encounter are strangers. But as we have seen, ancient peoples, and even modern indigenous groups, often lived in a seasonal cycle. Sometimes in small hunting groups, sometimes gathering in large settlements. They ranged over vast areas, and did not always live solely with relatives. In fact, most of the people around them were not family members, which is quite similar to our modern experience. The ability to get along with strangers is a unique human trait compared to other primates. Because we have imagined communities. A city itself is an imagined community. Even hunter-gatherers could establish cities. Traditional theories suggest that the agricultural revolution first created large food surpluses, which, combined with new transportation technologies like the invention of the wheel, allowed people to settle together and form cities. Managing such large populations supposedly required bureaucracy, a state as a coercive institution, a monarchy, and written records. However, these ideas have now been overturned. For example, Urlitu had no written language, yet it functioned perfectly well. Archaeological evidence shows that, as early as 4000 BCE, settlements with populations exceeding 10,000, essentially the earliest cities, had already appeared. But how did they come about? We know that 12,000 years ago, the last ice age ended, causing the earth to warm, glaciers to melt, and water bodies to increase. Initially, the courses of large rivers were unstable, flowing unpredictably. By 5000 BCE, river routes became more fixed, allowing people to settle near water sources. Especially at river deltas, where fertile silt accumulated faster than seawater could erode it, the best wetlands formed. People gathered near these wetlands, perhaps building religious sites or simply settling naturally. Thus, cities emerged. People could gather food, raise sheep near their homes, or practice casual farming. Resources were abundant, and life was easy. As long as individuals felt a spiritual connection to the settlement, they could stay there as citizens. Archaeological evidence suggests that these earliest cities were mostly egalitarian. Of course, we cannot claim with certainty that there was no monarchy, but there is an asymmetry in standards. Proving the existence of an autocratic monarchy is easy. One simply needs to find palaces and noble tombs. However, proving the existence of a democratic republic is much harder. The best one can do is observe that living conditions were equal and infer that political life was likely egalitarian as well. In their book, Graeber and Wengrow examined 3 ancient urban sites, demonstrating that cities did not necessarily require monarchy. Citizens could be equals. These 3 examples represent 3 different kinds of equality. The first type is where everyone is unique, making hierarchical distinctions irrelevant. Around 4100 BCE, large settlements capable of housing over 10,000 people began appearing in the black soil regions of Ukraine, exemplifying this form of equality. These sites have a unique structure, resembling the pattern in the image. All houses form 2 nested rings, expanding outward. Each site contained thousands of homes, each about 5 meters wide and 10 meters long. These homes were grouped into neighborhoods, each with a central house, possibly serving as a communal hall. However, there were no palaces or religious buildings in the city center, leaving its purpose unclear. Archaeologists have examined household artifacts. Each family's tableware and drinking vessels were different, and artistic styles of pottery varied. Some families even had their own unique rituals. Clearly, these people lived highly individualistic lives rather than adhering to a collective system. While there was likely some form of neighborly mutual aid, there seemed to be no need for centralized organization. The second type of equality is where everyone is as similar as possible. A representative example is the early Mesopotamian cities from around 4000 to 3000 BCE. We know that Mesopotamia later had the Babylonian Empire and Sumerian culture, but these cities predated the emergence of kings. There, every household used standardized items. Public works, such as the construction of religious sites, were undertaken collectively, with all citizens participating, as if they were celebrating a festival. These cities featured massive citizen assembly halls, suggesting that most men likely participated in governance through direct democracy. Even if there was a nominal king, each district likely practiced self-governance. The third type of equality is more unusual. It involved social hierarchies in daily life but political equality, at least for a specific group of people. A representative example is Mohenjo-Daro, a city built in 2600 BCE in what is now Pakistan, within the Indus Valley civilization. India is known for its caste system, which divides people into 4 ranks. Brahmins, priests, Kshatriyas, warriors and nobles, Vaishyas, farmers and merchants, and Shudras, laborers. This classification was not based on wealth or power but on purity. The further one was from pollutants, the higher their status. Mohenjo-Daro appears to have followed a similar principle. The city was divided into an upper city and a lower city. Wealthy individuals and ordinary citizens lived together in the lower city, while ascetic monks resided in the upper city. These monks might have been similar to those from the time of Buddha in the 5th century BCE. The key point is that there is no evidence of an authoritarian ruler. Major decisions were likely made collectively by the monks of the upper city. If they could not reach a consensus, they may have held votes. While one could call this a form of collective leadership, it was not autocratic. It is easy to understand why cities could adopt republican democracy. Every city-state in ancient Greece was a democratic city, and Rome was once a republic. Although both had aristocrats and slaves, making them far from truly egalitarian. The crucial point, as we previously discussed with Harari's argument, is that the real limitation on democracy is information technology. If one wishes to govern an extremely large territory, the limited ability to transmit information makes nationwide discussions impractical, forcing the adoption of an imperial system. Population size is not the issue. Throughout The Dawn of Everything, the authors emphasize that human societies always have a choice in how they organize themselves. A television program once stated that China's unification and Europe's fragmentation were not due to geographical factors favoring unification in China, but because generation after generation of Chinese people chose to maintain unity. As long as technology does not prevent a particular form of governance, everything is a matter of human choice rather than historical inevitability. That's it for today's content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
If you feel there is value in this, please like, subscribe to this channel, and leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section. Let's grow together and read more good books.